Department of Ancient Indian History, Culture and Archaeology, Punjab University, Chandigarh. We today speaking on the third module, Ajanta 1. The rock-cut caves at Ajanta are the sites of the oldest extant wall paintings in the country. Ajanta paintings are referred to as the fountainhead of Indian painting. Buddhist in theme, they also occupy a secular realm with the finest rendering of animals and contemporary life. This module deals with the paintings done during the first phase of activity at Ajanta. The time period, the subject matter, characteristics of these paintings along with the message and intent are discussed here. Ajanta caves were excavated between the 2nd century BC and 7th century AD out of a cliff of trap rock in the Sahyadri range that form a horseshoe form from east to west, covering a distance of about 550 meters. These caves are located 55 miles northeast of Aurangabad and 39 miles south of Jalgaon. Earlier access to these caves were originally via ladders or steep staircases cut into cliff, which led up from the river to the cave openings, but today they can be easily reached via a walkway that run across the cliff face. The first mention of these caves comes to us from the account of Yun Sang, who travelled in India from 629 AD to 645 AD and visited Ajanta in 643 AD. He mentions that the work here had almost stopped by then. Apparently during 9th century AD, they were abandoned and the site became overgrown with vegetation. The caves were unknown till 1819 when they were accidentally discovered by an English officer named John Smith during a tiger hunt. The caves were named after the nearby village of Ajanta. They came to public attention soon after when J. Ferguson prepared a short description and sent it to the Royal Asiatic Society. After that, numerous copies of the paintings were made, with one of the most consistent efforts made by J. Griffiths of the J.J. School of Art, Bombay, who along with his students worked here over a number of years to prepare pictures, some of which were published in the paintings of the Buddhist caves of Ajanta in 1891. These magnificent temples and monasteries, decorated with sculptures and wall paintings of the finest quality, are undoubtedly among the greatest of artistic monuments of the world. And were declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1983. Ajanta has a total of 29 caves, the majority of which are vihars, Buddhist monastery halls of residence, with 5 chaitya halls or chaitya griha, stoop halls. Chaitya is a Buddhist shrine or a prayer hall with a stoop at one end, which was an ideal place for meditation in the semi-darkness. Chaityas were built for ritual circumambulation by monks around the stoop, which symbolizes the Buddha in the Hinayan sect, whereas vihars, usually rectangular in shape, were used for daily living and prayers with small cubicle sleeping cells for the monks, cut into the walls, and shrine at the far end housing a stoop or a statue of the Buddha carved into the rock. Some of the caves are unfinished and provide documentary evidence as to the techniques of construction and decoration. Doorways, facades, columns, parts of wall and sanctuaries, monasteries are decorated with Buddhist sculptures and the walls with paintings. The masterpieces at Ajanta were executed over a period of 900 years, interspersed with the periods where work seems to have stopped. The initial phase belonged to the Hinayan school of Buddhism, whereas Mahayana school later phase started after a break of about 2 centuries. There is debate among scholars that the activities at Ajanta was in 2 or 3 phases. For the later, the view is that the third phase commenced after a short break in the 6th century AD. According to this, the phases of activity at Ajanta are: the first phase is circa 2nd century BC to circa 2nd century AD during the reign of Satvahans under Hinayan Buddhism. The middle phase is circa mid-4th century AD to early 6th century AD during the reign of the Vakataks under the Mahayana Buddha. And the last phase is assigned to 6th century AD to early 7th century AD during the reign of Chalukyas under the Mahayana Buddhism. Originally, all the caves at Ajanta were painted as evidenced by the remnants of paintings seen in the 19th century, but human interference and vicissitudes of nature resulted in only 16 caves recorded as having murals by 1879 and by 1910. The number had further reduced. At present, paintings are found mainly in cave number 10, 9, 16, 17, 1 and 2. As activity began at Ajanta in circa 3rd century BC, thus it is suggested that paintings would have followed the excavation of caves, and the earliest paintings are dated to circa 2nd century BC. Under the Satvans, in the first phase, 5 caves were made. The 3 Vihar caves number 8, 12 and 13 and 2 Chaitya caves number 9 and 10. Of these caves, 13 is said to be the earliest, and of the Chaityas, cave 10 is earlier than 9. The earliest paintings are found in cave number 10 and 9, made between 2nd century BC and 1st-2nd century AD. The Satvahans were the most dominant power in the Dakkan from the 2nd century BC to 2nd century AD, and the emperors were great patrons of art and literature. During the time of these monarchs, some of the most glorious Buddhist caves were excavated in living rock, many of them in Western India. The Nasik, Bedsa, Bhaja, Karle, Kondain caves are some of the famous ones. Paintings closely resembling the early sculpture of the Satvans at Bhaja, Amravati and Sanchi are found in Ajanta. According to C. Shivaramamurthy, inscriptions cave number 9 and 10 reveal to us the early date of the paintings here, which is already confirmed by features and characteristics that bring them close to Bhaja, Sanchi, Jagyapet and the early phases of Amravati. It is interesting to compare Satvahan sculptures in the first 2nd century BC with the paintings from Ajanta in these 2 caves. The script of the inscriptions is early Brahmi of the 2nd century BC. The paintings may therefore be assigned to the early phase of the Satvahan rule, probably the time of Shatkarni, to whose time Sanchi gateway carved by ivory carvers of Vidisha as recorded in an inscriptions can be assigned. These paintings thus form the predecessors of all the Gupta Vakataks and medieval paintings all over India. The entire site of Ajanta is a single sanctuary dedicated to Buddha, and all his majesty is celebrated in the massive columns, the majestic naves and also the numerous votive reliefs and ornaments. The most splendid feature is the painting cycles and sculpted reliefs which completely cover the caves, walls and walls. The paintings illustrate scenes from the life of Master and his previous lives, comprising the Jataks and Avadans. Jataks are a collection of stories concerning the previous births of Buddha. Before achieving enlightenment, the Buddha studied values of sacrifice, virtue and friendship in his previous lives. A Buddha in the process of learning is referred to as the Bodhisattva, who is either depicted as a protagonist or a supporting character. The experiences of these previous lives resulted in the Bodhisattva's ultimate transformation into the Buddha. In all these paintings of cave number 9 and 10, we do not notice any pictorial rendering of the Master, for such a depiction was forbidden by the Master and was not therefore employed by the Theravada artists. Instead, they depicted Buddha symbolically by painting the Bodhi tree, the throne, the wheel, the paduks or the Triratna. The purpose of these paintings was to bring the message of the Buddha to the laity and inspire them to follow his path. A German scholar in studies in Ajanta paintings states that the Jataks were also intended for the monks. According to him, the stories of Buddha's life and his previous births inspired the monks not just to personal salvation, but also to imbibe the concept of the charitable bodhisattva and to work for the salvation of all. The paintings in this first phase of activity are done in a broad frieze on the wall and extend up to the beginning of the vaulted roof. Therefore, the devotees look straight or up at the painting. The roof was left unadorned and was embellished later under the Vakataks. The condition of the surviving paintings in cave number 10 and 9 is such that they have been identified essentially by a study of the copies made in the 19th and 20th centuries by R. Gill, J. Griffiths and drawings by J. Yazdani. Cave number 10 is the earliest Chaitya hall. Here, with a votive stoop towards the absent, it has an inscription of the 2nd century BC mentioning one Vashishthiputra Kathahadi as the donor of the facade, while an inscription on the wall inside states that the wall was gift of Kanhak of Mahda. We find both earlier and later group of paintings here. Madanjit Singh considers them as belonging to the transitional period, the earlier to classic and later from classic to Baroque. In cave number 10, the painting are Naga frieze, Life of the Buddha, Shaddadanta Jatak and Siam Jatak. The fourth painted series that is on the wall behind the stoop is so deteriorated that it remains unidentified. The cave also has traces of simple lotus decoration in the coffers formed by the interlocking ceiling beams in the vault. These beams are now totally missing. A few very fine early floral and geometrical paintings can still be seen on the upper sections of some of the pillars, but at the lower level, these decorative panels have been covered with paintings of the 5th century. On the left wall, the painting long identified as the Naga frieze or Raja with his retinue going to worship the Bodhi tree, depicting a mythical historical figure as later as Gautamiputra Shakarni has been analyzed by a German scholar as a part of the story of the life of Buddha, starting from Buddha in Tushit heaven and ending with the transport of the relics. On the right wall of the Chaitya have been identified the Chaddan Jatak and the Siam Jatak. The wall narratives spread out almost like unrolled scrolls in cave number 10. Chaddan Jatak, one of the most popular story reproduced in Buddhist monuments, is an example. The Bodhisattva born as a noble elephant, leader of the herd, lived in a royal glory with his consorts Mahasubhada and Chulsubhada in a lotus lake near the Himalayas. Chulsubhada envied Mahasubhada, the favorite, and died despondent. She was born again as the queen of Banaras and, remembering her former birth, sought revenge on Chaddant. She pretended to be ill and demanded as cure the tusk of Chaddant. On royal command, a hunter called Sonutar undertook this mission of obtaining the tusk and wounded the noble animal. Chaddant not only forgave him but also willingly presented him with his tusk. A poignant touch here is that the animal himself cut on his tusk, as the hunter found it difficult to do so. At the sight of the tusk, the queen was filled with remorse, fainted and died. The painting here gives a pleasant picture of the life of elephant and his consorts in the lotus lake near the huge banyan tree. The queen's illness, the hunter sent to fetch the tusk, the presentation of the cut tusk to the queen's side. In fact, here almost 2/3 of the space is given over to the scenes in the jungle with the animals in their natural habitat and the sylvan surroundings shown through a refined artistic conception and technical skill. This also allows the extensive and detailed description of the forest, lotus lake and the banyan tree in the Jatak. The Siam Jatak is the story of the Bodhisattva Siam, who supported his blind parents living as hermits in the forest. When filling his pot with water from the river, the boy was inadvertently shot by the king of Benares, who was hunting in the forest. The king realized too late the disaster, and told by the dying Siam of his helpless parents, he offered himself to them to take the place of their beloved son. Moved by the intense sorrow of the helpless parents, a goddess restored to them not only their sight but also their son. The painting here shows the hunter king, the sorrowing parents, Siam pierced by the arrow and then restored to life. Remnants of 7 scenes of the painting are discernible here. These are Siam outside the parents' hut squatting in front of 2 attentive gazelles. Second, King of Benares, accompanied by his retinue, dismounting from his horse and taking aim at what he thinks is an animal. The third, the king shown again to the right, his bows unstrung, gazelles flee after he has shot his arrow and talking to Siam, who is still standing. The fourth scene, outside the hut of Siam's parents, where the king confesses. The fifth scene shows the parents lament over the loss of their child while the king stands watching. Sixth scene shows Siam regaining consciousness, and the seventh scene shows Siam talking to the king. The Buddha's virtues extolled in these paintings are Siam's love for animals, loyalty to parents, forgiveness and determination to atone for one's sins. The slight archaism seen in the figures of the paintings, commonly referred to as the Narwhal frieze, is shed here, and pathos is evoked well in the representation of the blind parents. Cave number 9 is a Chaitya hall with a fine facade. Its nave, apse and aisles composed by a colonnade of pillars running the entire length. Towards the apsidal end is an Udeshik stoop. The pillars and the other parts composing the Chaitya present the early characteristics of the sculptural art of the 2nd century BC. The cave has paintings done at different times, the earlier contemporary with the structure and the later of the 5th century AD. Of the paintings of the first phase is the visit and worship of Bodhi tree and the stoop by a royal personage accompanied by his retinue. Soldiers, dancers, musicians and ladies are the main themes of the paintings. Turbans of great variety worn by figures as seen in the sculptures at Amravati, Bhaja, Sanchi, Karle are represented in the paintings here. Interestingly, form, features, poses, ornamentation, dress, furniture, architectural settings and other details corresponding closely with sculptures can also be studied from the depicted painting. In these paintings in cave number 10 and 9 appear the characteristics of the painterly idiom at Ajanta, some of which will evolve in the next phase. Firstly, here the paintings are presented in a broad frieze with the artist defining a horizontal dictated space rising up to the lower part of the beam of the vaulted ceiling. Thus, there is a division of space into pictorial and empty space. The narration is episodic and continuous with elements of the stories such as trees, rocks, or a building forming natural dividers between episodes. So the story flows smoothly to be read by the viewer as he moves clockwise around the Chaitya. The line is even and flowing. The color palette is limited with use of red and yellow ochre, terra verde, lamp black and the white of lime. The representation of space is neither strictly two-dimensional nor fully three-dimensional, as the lack of illusionistic depth is countered by the overlapping of figures, with the ones at the back slightly raised up, therefore appear entire. The compositions have not as yet reached complex recension, yet the eye is led to the center of each scene or along the axis of movement. The figure composition are simple and the device of directional glances is used to direct attention to the main figure. The expression of emotions is restrained and pose and gesture are employed to express emotion. Figures are represented in rounded two-dimensionality through the use of tonal modeling. A method of imparting roundedness to form is through the use of bright colors in form that is the plane nearest to the eye, or by brushing sparse color so that white of the ground shows blue. Ghulam Yazdani, while investigating the paintings of cave number 9 and 10, finds an affinity in the painting of both these caves and concludes that their paintings were contemporary. On the basis of the style of these murals, he suggests that the stories have been depicted in a truthful manner without much decorative embellishment. The style in his view is well developed, for the drawing is firm and accurate. It rarely shows any disregard for the three-dimensional effect of the paintings. Significantly, in these paintings, he notices the precedence of religious emotions over others, as is evident in Ajanta and Ajanta. Ajanta caves predate Ellora caves by 600 years and are a testimony to the golden age of Buddhism in India. The paintings had a didactic function, imparting to the community the teaching of Buddha and his experiences. During his various reincarnations, devotees were supposed to walk through the cave and read the paintings, which were used as a medium of communicating Buddha's teaching about life through successive rebirth. According to one of the inscriptions in cave number 17, the whole complex of sculptures and wall paintings were designed to cause the attainment of well-being by good people as long as the sun dispels darkness by its rays. Nevertheless, the definition of good people was not limited to devoted ascetics, and these halls of meditation could also be frequented by the aristocrats who had embraced Buddhism. The paintings are meant to transmit a rhythmic equilibrium, indicating the harmony of a society in which the smallest gestures and desires have a specific place in a vision of the world that is much larger and devoid of disquiet. The majority of these murals are over 1,500 years old. It is extraordinary to think that 10 centuries before the European Renaissance, these anonymous artists already knew the principles of perspective, depth, and realism in their art. The expressions and emotions captured on the faces of the characters are amazingly real and modern. The craftsmen's unquestionable mastery of brush technique, along with their apparent familiarity with wealthy or noble subject matter, led experts like Walter M. Spink, professor at the University of Michigan and a world authority on the Buddhist rock art caves at Ajanta, to suppose that these talented painted in palaces and temples. Hence, there is a great familiarity that the artists show with the details of wealthy court. The highly accurate pictorial technique used in Ajanta and the method of execution makes these wall paintings unique in world. For many years, these pictures were called frescoes, but this is an erroneous term in this case, and they are now referred to as murals due to the fact that they were painted on a dry surface. A layer of clay was mixed with cow dung and powdered rice husk. This was first applied to the chipped rock surface. When it dried, a second coat of lime plaster was applied with a trowel. The lines of the image were then drawn in pink, brown or black, and the colors filled in with big brushes made from the hair of squirrel tails. These mineral colors were made from pebbles and vegetables mixed with glue. The main colors used were red, ochre yellow, brown, ochre, lamp, black and white, which was imported from northern India, Central Asia and Persia. In the pictorial cycles, all the characters are bright and multicolored but are never repeated. Fundamental concept of Indian art. The rock complex of Ajanta is renowned for its splendid mural paintings that are unique for their entirety and state of preservation within the panorama of ancient Indian art. During the 19th century, They were studied and published by two Italian experts, Professor Sissoni and Count Orsini, who treated a large number of the paintings. They cleaned and consolidated many of the paintings, reattaching loose areas to the walls and coating the surfaces with shellac and varnish. This varnish has darkened with time and has in many places become whitish and quite opaque, resulting in distortion of color and clouding of designs. However, Lawrence J. Majesty is of the view that reports of loss of paint due to this varnishing are grossly exaggerated. As a matter of fact, when early photographs were compared with the present day painted surface, no loss of paint could be observed. It is even possible that the varnish has had some preservation effect, although today it has become quite dark, cloudy and unsightly. It is also very true that conserving monuments is not an easy task, because we have to first identify that what is the quality of the monument, its architecture, various material used for construction and causes of its deterioration. Only then we have to think on how we can conserve it. All these aspects are very important, not only to know but also for preservance of these monuments. The Chemical Branch of Archaeological Survey of India is doing an incredible work to conserve and preserve Ajanta cave. Restoration efforts have continued at Ajanta with experience and the advancement of conservation techniques. Methods are constantly reviewed and new measures are taken to preserve the paintings, which remain vulnerable to water seepage and tourist inflow. High imaging cameras are used to capture finer details of the paintings, and the parts which are destroyed or faded are restored. Thus, heritage is the mirror of any culture and it reflects the story of its past, but it is our responsibility to conserve it. Ajanta's paintings occupy the preeminent position in the mural tradition of Asia. According to Lawrence Vignon, in the art of Asia, Ajanta occupies supreme and central position. Therefore, the influence of Ajanta paintings was felt over a wide area in Ceylon, Nepal, Tibet, Afghanistan, Mongolia, China and even distant Japan came under its influence. The Ajanta mannerism is seen in the paintings of these countries to a smaller or greater degree. The paintings at Sigiriya in Ceylon are closest to Ajanta tradition. The wall paintings at Bagh, about 250 kilometers north of Ajanta, suggest that the artist employed at this place belonged to the same school. Ajantaism assumed new forms in different spheres and in remote climes. Says a Sanskrit poet, the nature of beauty is such as assumes new forms every moment, so does the art of Ajanta.